Hi guys, welcome back to Hamster Workshop. Today I'm going to show you guys how I put together this wall-mounted PC. There's a lot to cover, so let's get to it. So the first part of this project, perhaps is the scariest part, which is cutting open the AIO that I have. It is Cooler Master ML240. I bought it when it was on sale for $90. Great performance and budget friendly, no complaints there. But since I want to do an open loop, I have to cut it open and replace the tubes and coolant. During the process, I noticed that there are hard plastic tubes with extra sleeve covering. It is harder to cut than soft tubings, but a pair of semi-decent scissors would for sure be sufficient for the job. The amount of coolant is surprisingly small, but since I'm going to include an additional reservoir in the loop, it does not matter much. Removing the tubes from the nozzles requires a knife. I have to be really careful when cutting it open on the pump side because the nozzles are plastic. Cutting it too deep will damage the nozzle and make it useless. The radiator side requires the same procedure, but the nozzles here are metal, a bit easier to handle. All the nozzles here have Barb style fitting. The diameter is about 6.5 mm, so the soft tubing of 6 mm inner diameter will work perfectly. The second part is to put a water block onto the GPU. It is less scary because there is a somewhat standard procedure to follow, but it's much more expensive if I mess it up, because I'll be foregoing about $900 worth of components. Luckily nothing bad happened. So here's what I did. Removing all the screws from the backplate of the GPU. Separating the cooling block from the GPU circuit board. Removing any thermal pads and thermal paste. Replacing the thermal pads and reapplying the thermal paste. Putting the water block onto the GPU and securing it with the screws from the backplate. Finally, putting on the end caps and the GPU water block assembly is completed. For the baseboard, I bought this 2x2 plywood with 1/2 inch thickness from Home Depot. Considering it is a replacement for the PC case, it is actually pretty cheap. I then laid the component on the board and traced out any mounting holes and cutouts needed using a pen. Because I want to do a push and pull configuration for the radiator, I also drew the additional mounting holes for the fans. I used a circular saw to make a rough cut, and then used a handsaw to remove the cutout. Because the board is longer than I needed, I also used a table saw to cut it to length. I then proceed to cut the rest of the board using a power drill, a circular saw, a jigsaw, a handsaw, and a knife. You can see I made a small mistake there, but because it will be covered by the radiator assembly, I didn't bother redoing everything again. After sanding it down, I then painted it black using spray paint. Let it dry overnight, and then the baseboard is pretty much done. All I needed to do is to fix this backplate onto the board and it can be mounted onto the wall. Because the wall mount use M8 screws, I pre-drilled the holes using 1764 drill bit and hand tapped the holes with an M8 die. The wall mount I selected is this one because it's pretty cheap but can handle a rather heavy load. Most of the front side holes are M3. Same deals, drill, tap and vacuum. I also 3D printed an L bracket to hold the power supply. As it is recessed into the board, it doesn't require much additional force to hold it in place. Now all the parts can be fixed onto the board one by one, and the PC is finally coming together. The second last part of the assembly is the tubing. I opt to use a combination of soft and hard tubes. I try to use as many hard tubes as I can, while the soft tubes are used for the connections to the AIO components. To bend the hard tubes, I use the heat gun to soften the tube while having a rubber fitting inserted to prevent it from shrinking. It took a few rounds of measuring, bending and cutting, but all in all, it's a fairly easy process and the end result looks pretty good. I end up replacing the small soft tube here with hard tubing, because the turning radius is so small that it creates a sharp bend that limits the flow significantly. I'll show you what I mean later in the video. After rinsing the loop, it is finally the time to pull in the coolant. Here you can see, because of the bend I mentioned earlier, the flow is so little that it left a big chunk of air in the loop. After replacing it, it finally worked. To install the wall mount fixture, I used a stud finder to find the studs in the wall. Placing the fixture horizontally to mark the exact locations, pre-drill the holes and mount the fixtures onto the wall using M8 screws. After placing the baseboard onto the wall mount, I fixed a power strip on the backside of the baseboard along with some LED strips. Some cable management process later. The setup is almost done. I also used an in-wall cable management kit I found on Amazon to hide the cables. Unfortunately, one of the hole saw attachment is now residing permanently in between my walls. Lesson learned. So be sure to tightly fasten the drill bit if you are going to do it yourself. To complete the setup, I also made this 3-level shelf to balance the look. And this is the final outcome. This wall mount PC setup is for sure a challenging project. That said, I had a lot of fun putting it together. Compared to the previous setup, this build doesn't take any floor space and provided a much cleaner and better look. I'm really happy with the outcome. Okay, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you like this video, please click that like button, and if you like to see more content like this one, please subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.